At 4:17 a.m., federal officials confirmed what many had feared but few could imagine at this scale. In a coordinated operation stretching across multiple states, combined DEA and FBI strike teams moved on a massive logistics hub tied to narcotics trafficking. The numbers were staggering. 52 tons of methamphetamine, dozens of warehouses, and a paper trail that didn't stop at criminals but climbed straight into political corridors. By sunrise, investigators were already calling it one of the most dangerous cartel-linked infrastructure takedowns ever uncovered on US soil. The location at the center of it all wasn't a border town or a remote desert outpost. It was Minneapolis, a city far from the southern border, quietly transformed into a nerve center for a national drug pipeline. What appeared to be a routine freight operation was allegedly functioning as a cartel artery, moving tons of narcotics under the cover of legitimate commerce. Officials warned this was not just a drug bust. It was the exposure of a system designed to hide in plain sight, protected by silence, influence, and power. And according to early briefings, what agents found inside those facilities was only the beginning. At 4:32 a.m., Minneapolis was still asleep when the first convoy rolled. No sirens, no flashing lights, just matte black vehicles sliding through industrial streets where warehouses sat dark and silent. Federal agents had been in position for hours, staged across multiple blocks, waiting for a synchronized green light that would turn a quiet logistics district into a battlefield. When the signal came, FBI, DEA, and ICE teams moved at once. Steel doors were breached. Flashbangs cracked the air. Shadows flooded concrete corridors as agents swept through loading bays stacked with shrink-wrapped pallets labeled as consumer goods. The smell hit immediately. Chemicals. Fuel. Something sharp and unmistakably wrong. This was not freight. This was a drug fortress disguised as commerce. Inside the first warehouse, agents uncovered industrial-scale methamphetamine processing equipment hidden behind false walls. Not street-level packaging. This was bulk production. Vacuum sealers, hydraulic presses, and chemical drums lined the floor. Preliminary counts put the seizure in the tens of tons before dawn had even broken. Every box was catalogued. Every sample logged. The numbers kept climbing. Across the district, parallel teams hit secondary sites. A refrigerated storage facility. A cross-docking terminal. A maintenance yard for long-haul trucks. Each location revealed the same pattern. Legitimate logistics on the surface. Narcotics underneath. In one trailer, agents found fentanyl pills concealed inside food-grade containers. In another, cocaine bricks embedded within machine parts. This was diversification at scale. Suspects attempted to flee. Some ran with duffel bags stuffed with cash. Others tried to torch documents or dump hard drives into industrial drains. It didn't work. Agents moved fast, cutting exits, pinning suspects to the ground, zip ties snapping tight in the low light. By 6 a.m., dozens were in custody, faces pressed against cold concrete, disbelief written across every expression. Then came the discovery that changed everything. In a secured office tucked above the main loading floor, agents found a server rack hidden behind a biometric lock. Not the kind used by small operators. This was enterprise-grade hardware. Encrypted drives. Redundant backups. A private network link running through offshore nodes. The room was climate-controlled, shielded, and professionally maintained. This was command infrastructure. Alongside the servers sat steel lockboxes containing handwritten ledgers and coded manifests. Routes. Dates. License plates. Shipment weights. And names. Not nicknames or street handles, but formal titles tied to municipal departments, advisory boards, and administrative offices. The implication was immediate and chilling. This wasn't just a cartel using a warehouse. This was a logistics hub integrated into a protected system. Someone had engineered this to survive scrutiny. Someone with access. As agents secured the final perimeter, the scale of the operation became clear. More than 52 tons of methamphetamine would be confirmed by the end of the morning. Weapons caches were pulled from hidden compartments. Millions in cash was seized. But the most dangerous material wasn't the drugs or the money. It was the data. By sunrise, evidence teams were already transporting servers to a federal cyber lab under armed escort. Analysts warned that the architecture suggested a network far beyond Minneapolis. This hub was a node. A critical one. And taking it down had likely triggered alarms elsewhere. Officials on scene avoided statements. This wasn't something that could be summarized at a podium. It needed analysis. Context. Time. What agents had stumbled into was not a single bust. It was the front door to a coordinated national pipeline designed to move narcotics through the heartland under the cover of routine logistics. As the last suspect was loaded into a transport van, one agent on the scene put it simply. This wasn't about drugs anymore. This was about who built the system and who protected it. And according to what was found inside that office, the next phase would not stay confined to warehouses. Before teams cleared the scene, Command confirmed coordinated seizures at additional sites linked by shipping records, tightening the net. Radio traffic buzzed with controlled urgency as supervisors warned that exposure could trigger retaliation or evidence destruction elsewhere. The raid was over, but the operation was just beginning. Every crate, every server, every name would now pull investigators deeper into a web built to endure pressure. By 9:11 a.m., the evidence was no longer moving through warehouses. It was moving through fiber optic cables. Inside a secured federal cyber forensics lab, analysts began cloning the seized servers, isolating partitions, and cracking layered encryption that had clearly been designed by professionals. This was not a street crew setup. It was a command network. As the first datasets came online, a diagram started to form. Nodes, arrows, timelines. Analysts labeled the architecture with a working name pulled from internal metadata, Operation Northgate. What unfolded on the screens was not a loose collection of crimes. It was a logistics empire. Shell companies stacked on top of shell companies appeared first. Freight firms registered in multiple states. Sham maintenance contractors. Ghost non-profits masquerading as workforce programs. Restaurant groups used to wash cash through inflated invoices. A charity with a benign mission statement that, on paper, moved millions across borders under the guise of humanitarian aid. Each entity fed into the next, masking the true origin of funds while smoothing the movement of narcotics. Money flowed in arcs that crossed continents. Payments jumped from Midwest freight accounts to offshore processors, then re-entered the system as consulting fees or equipment leases. The sophistication was startling. Transfers were timed to avoid reporting thresholds. Currency conversions were staggered to blur trails. Even seasoned investigators paused, recognizing the fingerprints of financial engineers rather than criminals. Then came the access logs. Buried inside an encrypted authorization layer was a recurring digital signature tied to a municipal office. Not a low-level clerk. Not a contractor. A senior executive credential linked to a mayoral administrative suite. Analysts cross-referenced timestamps with shipment schedules and found alignment that was too precise to dismiss. Road closures coincided with convoy movements. Zoning exemptions matched warehouse expansions. Routine inspections vanished from calendars when high-risk loads passed through. This wasn't corruption by neglect. This was coordination. According to internal briefings, investigators traced directives that rerouted traffic patterns, delayed weigh station checks, and authorized temporary maintenance on surveillance systems at critical moments. Each action, on its own, could be explained away. Together, they formed a shield. A city quietly transformed into a secure transit hub for a drug empire. Agents reviewing the data used language rarely heard in preliminary reports. This is not negligence. This is command-level collusion. This is not influence. This is control. The realization shifted priorities instantly. What began as a narcotic seizure became a counter-infiltration operation. Prosecutors were looped in. Parallel teams were spun up to protect the integrity of the case. Investigators warned that exposure at this level often triggers rapid countermeasures, evidence purges, witness intimidation, and preemptive narratives designed to muddy timelines. As analysts dug deeper, the network expanded outward. Trucking routes branched to neighboring states. Port references appeared in coded notes. A corridor emerged that funneled methamphetamine, cocaine, and fentanyl through distribution points timed to exploit labor shortages and inspection backlogs. Conservative estimates suggested the pipeline could move multiple tons per week without triggering alerts. The most chilling discovery arrived just before noon. A contingency file. Labeled simply Continuity. Inside were protocols for disruption. Alternate routes. Backup shell entities. Replacement managers. The system had been designed to survive raids. To absorb losses. To adapt. Someone had planned for this moment. Investigators understood the implication immediately. Taking down the Minneapolis hub would not be enough. The network anticipated pressure and had already laid groundwork to reroute. That meant speed mattered. Delay would cost leverage. By early afternoon, a decision was made. This could not be a slow, methodical case. It had to be decisive, coordinated, overwhelming. The window to strike the wider network was closing. Commanders ordered a rapid escalation. What had started before dawn as a localized raid was now transforming into a regional eradication effort. Warrants were drafted in parallel. Federal task forces across multiple jurisdictions were alerted. Air support was placed on standby. Analysts continued mapping nodes as operators prepared to move. An internal memo circulated with a single line underlined twice: "If we pause, they disappear." As the sun dipped lower, the operation crossed a threshold. This was no longer about what had been seized. It was about what remained in motion. And according to the data still scrolling across those screens, the next phase would unfold at scale. What agents had uncovered in Minneapolis was not the end of a pipeline. It was the blueprint of a machine built to outlast enforcement. And dismantling it would require hitting everything at once, before the network could close ranks and vanish back into the noise. By 4:58 a.m. the following morning, the command center was fully lit, screens glowing with a single operational map that stretched far beyond Minneapolis. Red markers pulsed across multiple cities, distribution corridors, and industrial zones, each one representing a node tied to the logistics network uncovered the day before. What investigators were seeing was not a regional problem. It was a national design. Federal leadership authorized an escalation rarely used outside terrorism cases. Over 1,000 agents across FBI, DEA, ICE, DHS, and SWAT units were activated simultaneously. Air support was approved. Armored vehicles rolled. Communications were locked to encrypted channels only. This was no longer a takedown. It was an eradication. As dawn approached, strike teams moved in waves. In the outskirts of a neighboring state, agents breached a desert warehouse masquerading as an agricultural supply depot. Inside, they found a drug superlab capable of producing methamphetamine at industrial scale. Presses still warm. Chemicals mid-process. The operation shut it down in under 12 minutes. In the hills outside a wealthy suburb, a fortified mansion went dark as agents cut power and stormed the gates. Beneath imported stone floors, they uncovered hidden vaults stacked with cash, weapons, and ledgers detailing weekly shipments measured in tons. The owner attempted to flee through a concealed exit and was intercepted within seconds. Near a major interstate, ICE units intercepted a convoy of trucks rerouted moments before arrival. Drivers claimed ignorance. The cargo told a different story. Fentanyl pills hidden inside sealed machinery crates. Cocaine embedded in industrial components. Each truck represented millions in street value and thousands of potential deaths. Back in Minneapolis, arrests began quietly. Not at warehouses, but in offices. Senior planners. Consultants. A deputy administrator whose access credentials matched the digital signatures flagged in the forensic lab. Each arrest sent a shockwave through the system. Phones lit up. Messages went dark. The network was realizing it had been fully exposed. Inside seized servers, investigators uncovered internal communications that revealed the depth of infiltration. Law enforcement patrol schedules altered to create gaps. Border inspections delayed on cue. Raid locations leaked minutes before warrants were served in previous years. This was not bribery on the margins. It was a parallel enforcement structure operating beneath the badge. Agents confronted colleagues they had trusted. Officers who had worn the same uniforms, attended the same briefings, and shared the same mission statements. Some broke down. Others stayed silent. The betrayal cut deep. One veteran investigator described it as discovering a second police force hidden inside the first. By mid-morning, more than 80 arrests were confirmed. Not just traffickers, but facilitators, planners, protectors. Entire layers of the operation were peeled back in real time. Evidence rooms filled with seized firearms, encrypted phones, cash, and servers pulled from ceilings, walls, and underground compartments. As the scope expanded, analysts zoomed out one final time. Routes extended toward ports, agricultural corridors, rail hubs. The system had been designed to move narcotics invisibly, using the same infrastructure that fed the economy. This was not infiltration after the fact. This was redesign. A final file surfaced late in the operation. A long-term projection outlining plans to entrench the network permanently by embedding logistics firms, non-profits, and advisory boards into civic planning. It wasn't about surviving law enforcement. It was about outlasting it. The realization settled heavily over the command center. This was not a cartel hiding from the system. This was a cartel shaping it. As operations concluded, officials acknowledged the cost. Communities poisoned. Families destroyed by fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and meth. Lives reduced to numbers on spreadsheets. The damage could not be undone overnight, but the machine driving it had been dealt a critical blow. By nightfall, the map dimmed. Red markers went dark. But no one believed the threat had vanished completely. Systems like this do not disappear. They adapt. What happened in Minneapolis was a warning. Power does not always arrive with guns and threats. Sometimes it arrives with permits, signatures, and silence. This story remains a fictional dramatization inspired by real issues. But the danger it reflects is real. And the lesson is clear. When crime learns to wear legitimacy, exposure becomes the only weapon left. If you're still watching, stay alert. Question what moves unnoticed. And remember, this operation ended, but the fight to reclaim systems from corruption never truly does. If you're still here, you already understand this wasn't just a story about drugs or raids. It was about how power hides, how systems can be bent quietly, and how damage spreads when silence is rewarded. This fictional dramatization is a warning, not a verdict. The real question is how many networks survive simply because no one looks too closely. If you believe corruption should be dragged into the light, leave a comment and say expose. If this story made you think differently about how crime and authority can overlap, tap like so others see it too. Subscribe for the next briefing. Because operations end, but accountability only begins when people keep watching.